Hello everybody, welcome back to the TAPED podcast. The most offbeat podcast in the world. We are your hosts, as always, myself, MickyT.
And me, Nostalgia.
And me, Sam The Music quote-unquote critic.
Yep, our special guest today, Sam The Music Critic. Woo! Welcome onto the show, dude.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, and with that in mind, today we are going to be doing a worst to best. And we're going to do a worst to best on a band from a genre that, I feel like we don't really give enough love to on the podcast. The last thing we've ever done, like, metal related, was a Tool worst to best, which was back in May, I think. Or
it was also 5 albums long.
Yes. But we have a lengthy enough discography today from a metal discography. So we're going to be covering arguably the biggest metal band to ever do it, the thrash metal giants, Metallica. And this is going to be interesting because, Metallica, they have an interesting discography, to say the least. They are laying claim to some of the best metal albums ever made, and some of the not-so-great metal albums ever made. They have albums.
Yeah, let's just put it like that.
Yeah, they have some albums, and for this ranking, we're going to be including like their normal 10 albums from Kill 'Em all the way up to their new one, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. But we're also going to be including their collaborative album that they did with the late Lou Reed, Lulu. Everyone's favorite album.
Yep.
And
spoilers, and I think my number one pick.
True. Oh. So I think we'll just get right into it already. So with that in mind, we're going to start at the number 11 spot. And for my number 11, controversial pick here, I chose Saint Anger.
Oh god, how could you?
Really?
I did too.
That's like the second best one behind Lulu.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I had to be the contrarian
maybe.
Here. You mean a masochist?
Masochist, yeah. I said I got those mixed up yesterday as well, but the other way around. Can I mention that I'm only awake
he's a very sleepy boy.
All my yeah.
Alright, what was your pick, Sam?
Oh yeah, mine's another controversial opinion coming right at you. Saint Anger.
Alright. Yeah.
Oh my god, how could you?
I never seen this.
I just can't help having bad taste, man. I don't know how to fix it.
Damn. It's one of my favorite albums ever. It's definitely up there with fucking the Korn dubstep album.
Yeah, definitely.
Alright, so Saint Anger. Now between the release of Reload and Saint Anger, a lot of things were going on and changing for the band. Like, Jason Newsted, their former bassist, left Metallica in 2001. James Hetfield went to rehab, and the remaining band members were just at each other's throats and just releasing so much built-up turmoil that they had between each other. And this is well documented in the Some Kind of Monster documentary, which is actually pretty good if you want to check that out. And it makes sense with Saint Anger, and it kind of adds a bit to the creative process of the album, which on that level I can kind of respect it on. But Jesus Christ, the end result was something else. Just truly something else. When I first heard this album, I was a bit lenient towards it because I just thought it was a mess, but a funny mess. But after listening to it a few times recently, I just got completely fed up with it, and it's slowly becoming one of my least favorite albums of all time, to be honest. There are things that this album... there's just so many things that just don't work for this album. It's borderline insulting, and it's been said numerous times, so I'm going to keep it a little brief. The production is terrible. The mixes are consistently muddy. The guitars are boring. The riffs are unmemorable. There's not a single solo to be found. There's so many stale and forgettable ideas. The songs... Did I just say the strong songs? The song structures are somehow so predictable yet messy. And the worst thing about it, of course, is the drums. Like, the drums in Saint Anger are infamous for how bad the snare sounds. It's so loud, it's so noisy, it's so ugly. Lars literally sounds like he's beating the shit out of the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, and it gets worse when it's added on top of the muddy cacophony of guitars. James's performances are woeful at best. Some of his dumbest lyrics turn up on this album. Some of his worst vocals turn up on this album, and he just doesn't stop, and it's insipid. And, not to mention, this album's an hour and 15 minutes. You know, Metallica have an issue with editing their album lengths for their newest stuff, but knowing that it's Saint Anger, it's just way too much. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, this album is such a shit show that I don't even know where to begin. For one, alternative metal and Metallica are just two worlds that should have never collided. It's clear to me that, you know, the band were in a slump when it comes to their career, and they seen all of the different, you know, alternative metal bands gaining mainstream attention and thought to themselves, oh yeah, we can do that. We're the metal guys. We can definitely do that. And no, they fucking couldn't. James Hetfield's vocals here are fucking awful. The instrumentals are TK Maxx bargain bin levels of generic. The mixing is so sloppy to the point it's laughable. Songwriting is fucking stupid. And, you know, everyone always mentions the snare drum. But the fact that this thing just keeps pounding and pounding and pounding for the whole fucking 1 hour plus that this album goes on for, it's just like a test of your patience. And I fail. I usually cannot like listen to this album in one sitting. It is painful, and that snare drum is literally I know it's the thing that's talked about the most, and everyone always brings that into the spotlight, but it's so fucking frustrating that it literally brings this album down like a star automatically.
Yeah, that you guys just pretty much, you know, put out everything I was thinking there, but I might as well, you know, add my own points. I think for the first minute of the album, I was just laughing my head off. Like, I was having the time of my life there. And then it went on for like 70 minutes. Yeah, that was very fun. Didn't help that the snares sounded like pots and pans, as you guys have said before. James Hetfield sounds like the guy from Nickelback. So that's
oh my god. He does. No.
And some of the lyrics, yeah, I mean, you got such classics as my lifestyle my lifestyle determines my death style. The classic
to James Hetfield's defense, he didn't write that. It was Kirk Hammett who wrote that.
Oh, okay. Still, though, you know, I gotta.
You have to mention it. You have to mention it.
You know, got the classic bar. I just can't say these without laughing. I'm madly in anger with you. One of the deepest lyrics to ever be recorded.
Oh my God.
But like, even if we're like looking past all the irony, the album's just really boring. Like, there's barely anything of note here except for the bad parts. Like, I don't know. It's difficult trying to like point out the best parts that aren't the parts where I just started laughing my head off. You know?
Yeah, I get you there. To be fair, I laughed my ass off when I first heard Saint Anger too, but like, I don't know, when you get used to it, it just becomes insipid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll just move on to best and worst tracks. There are no good tracks on Saint Anger, so I have no favorite tracks. Every track on here is awful, but the absolute worst tracks are Invisible Kid, Dirty Window, Some Kind of Monster, and in my opinion, the worst Metallica song, Purify.
I also don't have any favorites. My least favorites were Frantic, Invisible Kid, My World, and Sweet Amber.
Yeah, I guess if I like desperately had to pick a best track, it's probably the the opening track, Frantic, because that's the one where I just started laughing. Worst is probably wow, how do I choose the worst? So many different, like, I guess, like, what's the word? So many like different, like, I don't know. I guess probably maybe the title track.
That's
just trying to. Yeah.
God, the background vocals on that song are awful. Jesus.
Yeah.
So yeah, moving on to our number 10 picks, I chose Death Magnetic.
I chose Reload.
I chose Reload as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, nice. How am I the contrarian? I'd be a contrarian if I had this higher on my list, to be fair, because I actually used to have it higher. You know,
shame.
Death Magnetic
Shame.
is Metallica's quote-unquote comeback after a lot of the material that preceded this was just heavily scrutinized. And if you asked me a few months ago, I would have told you that this was a bit underrated. But after revisiting it again for this, I'm not so lenient on it now. Death Magnetic saw Metallica return to their thrash roots, and to me, this album is a woeful attempt at recapturing what made Metallica so good in the 80s, and the sound of this album doesn't help at all. Production-wise, I think it's one of Metallica's worst-sounding albums, and I make that critique because the sound mix on this album is some of the worst I've heard on a Metallica record. Not as bad as Saint Anger, obviously, but it's migraine-inducing with how loud and overcompressed everything is on here. Plus, the guitar solos are honestly really bad on this album. Like, they just sound painful and out of place. You know, everything about this album seems overdone as well, like James Hetfield's performances. You know, vocally he sounds great, but at the same time he just sounds obnoxious alongside the overcompressed production. Once again, Metallica show that they have a problem with bloating their records. You know, not in terms of how many tracks are on, but in terms of how they stretch out these tracks so much. You know, most of these tracks are unnecessarily long, and the awful mix only adds to the monotony. It also seems like Metallica are just running out of ideas. Like, revisiting your thrash roots is cool and all, but you have to make it sound fresh, but instead you're just rehashing ideas from previous Metallica albums. Like, a couple of tracks on this album aren't too bad, but as a whole, this album experience is just unpleasant, and probably one of my least favourite Metallica albums because of that.
Yeah, Load and Reload aren't just a left turn when it comes to the band's career. They're a fucking U-turn right into the car behind them. You know, their self-titled already started hinting at them kind of going more mainstream and ditching the very raw and very punchy approach of their first few albums. But this album, like Reload and Load, just takes any technical prowess and anthemic nature of Metallica's earlier output for a cheap southern hard rock style, which is very poorly executed in my opinion. The riffs are awfully generic and bland, and there's no punchiness and power to any of them. The vocals, I'm going to be honest, suck ass. To be honest, I don't really think James' vocals are that great outside of the very anthemic thrash metal style. Anything else he tries to do, he just kind of fucking sounds like he's taking a shit.
Thrash metal.
Yeah, and you know, an hour plus, again, Metallica like to stretch out their albums. It's fine when the albums are good. It's really unbearable when the albums are like this. And again, an hour plus of this is painful, but at least the snare drum sounds like a snare drum.
At least.
Yeah, nostalgia, that's basically exactly what I thought. But, yeah, I guess I might as well give my own thoughts. So, Load, it was, you know, it felt like a B-side album on its own. It basically took what the self-titled did and made it really boring. And Reload made it even more boring. But this time, now they've added obnoxious vocals. Like, seriously, some of the vocals in the middle section of the album, why did they think that was a good idea? There's barely any highlights on there. Literally, the only highlight I can really think of is the first track. And even, like, the second the track started, I was like, oh boy, I'm in for a wild ride. That must, you know, really, I guess, give you an idea of just what we were getting into, if that's, like, the absolute pinnacle of the album, the absolute peak. And the lyrics are just really simplistic and, I don't know, bad. Like, I mean, you've got a track like Better Than You, which is literally exactly what the title says, just Metallica telling you that they're better than you. Like, that's some totally A-grade material right there.
Hell yeah, they really outdid themselves there in the Metallica writing team.
And even when they're trying to come up with, you know, like, unique ideas, like, you know, tracks like maybe Where the Wild Things Are, Low Man's Lyric, The Memory Remains, even they're just, like, okay at best. Except for The Memory Remains, I don't like that one at all. Like, the featured artist is just... I don't get why they thought adding these, like, I don't know, na vocals after the chorus sounded any good. I don't get...
'Cause Metallica sold out, man.
It's just weird. They also do this thing with their vocals where they like to slow down what they're saying, not like mechanically, but like say it in a very slow manner, and it's just so off-putting. I've just never really liked that type of, I guess, vocal melody. And yeah, that's what I got to say about Reload. Should have kept that one in the drafts.
Should have really. Yeah, they should have kept it on load.
Except for the first 5 seconds of Fuel, they can keep that.
Yeah, that's iconic. So yeah, my favourite tracks from Death Magnetic are That Was Just Your Life, All Nightmare Long, and The Unforgiven 3. My least favourite tracks are Suicide and Redemption, The Day That Never Comes, and Cyanide.
My favourite tracks on Reload were Fuel and Slither. My least favourite tracks were Better Than You, Bad Seed, Low Man's Lyric, and The Unforgiven, one of the worst fucking song sequels ever.
My favourite track is the first 5 seconds of Fuel, where it goes, give me fuel, give me fire, give me that much I desire. I posted something in the discussion chat. You guys should definitely put that in the podcast video.
Definitely should.
Will do.
See this. That's too good.
So I guess Fuel and either Low Man's Lyric or Fixer, I don't really know. And my least favorites are probably either Carpe Diem Baby, Bad Seed, or Better Than You, Slither. I don't know any of those. Devil to Dance. There's a bunch of things I could choose, but that's just some of them.
Yeah. Alright, moving on to our number 9. I chose Reload.
I chose Load.
And I chose Death Magnetic.
Alright, nice.
But we've got different picks.
Yeah, Reload is a follow-up to Load, obviously, and in many ways they're basically the same album, but, you know, Reload is lower on my list for a couple of reasons. I personally think Reload has the upper hand when it comes to highs between the albums, but Reload has just some of the lowest lows that Metallica have ever made. Some of the band's most embarrassing songs turn up on this album, and they're just incredibly grating. What makes it even worse is that, once again, there is plenty of filler. A lot of it is blatant filler. The songs are drawn out unnecessarily, and they just sound like leftovers that could have been on Load. But it's just way too long, man. Well, the production is... I think the production is fine for what it is. It doesn't help that these songs are drawn out, and it doesn't help that a lot of James Hetfield's vocals are just bad. There's maybe one or two moments that are just fine in terms of songwriting, but ultimately a lot of it ranges from meh to terrible. You know, some of Metallica's worst ballads are on this album. Like what the fuck is Carpe Diem Baby? Like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
You know, the tracks that I think are good are genuinely fun, well put together, performed well and catchy, but sadly those moments are few and far in between, and Reload just gets rendered insignificant in the band's catalogue because of that.
Yeah, I went with Load, and I'm gonna keep this very brief because if I'm being because if I'm being honest, this album is flaw-wise the same as Reload. There's very little in between them. This one's just marginally more listenable for me personally, so I'll just leave it at that. I won't waste everyone's time. They're both shite.
Alright. Death Magnetic. This is an interesting one. Metallica, they finally come back to thrash after the train wreck that was Saint Anger. And, well, you see, if you take away most of the problems I have with this album that I'm gonna mention later, and even then, one of the main problems will still be there, you'd have, like, an okay thrash album, but my god, the production on this thing is garbage. Like, for some reason, they decided to make it as over-compressed as possible, to the point where I'm pretty sure it's, like, clipping in some tracks. It's just like, there's this one part in, like, the Judas Kiss, where, like, all these drums start coming in, and it's just a mess. Like, it's just distorted as hell. And, the tracks... that was a terrible voice crack, sorry. The tracks... the tracks are drawn out beyond belief. Like here, they just drag on for like 3 minutes longer than they need to. And even then, it's like they're constantly trying to make like a classic Metallica track. Like every track, they're always trying to make like, you know, this big anthem or something. But they just kind of forgot how, because, you know, they're trying to bring in all these crazy riffs, these insane choruses, but they all just kind of like fall short and they end up just feeling really middle of the road. Yeah, it just feels like an attempt to like make another classic Metallica album without actually, you know, knowing how to make a classic Metallica album. And they couldn't even fix the drums.
Literally. Yeah, my favorite tracks from Reload are Fuel, Devil's Dance, The Unforgiven 2, and Prince Charming. The worst tracks are Carpe Diem Baby, Where the Wild Things Are, Attitude, Slither, and Bad Seed.
My favorite track on Load was Hero of the Day. My least favorite tracks were The House That Jack Built, Cure, Poor Twisted Me, and The Thorn Within.
Alright, from what I recall, my favorites are probably That Was Just Your Life and maybe Suicide and Redemption and possibly the last track. And my least favorites are probably Broken Beat and Scarred. The Judas Kiss is just off from what I remember. And either The Day That Never Comes or The End of the Line, I'm not too sure.
Alright, moving on to our number 8 picks. I chose Load.
I chose Death Magnetic.
Oh, whoops. And I chose Load as well.
Alright.
I'll go last then.
Okay, we have all the same albums out of the way now, don't we?
Yeah.
Shows what the quality is, damn. Right, so, yeah, Load was a moment in Metallica's career that saw them change in a lot of ways, more than what they previously done, and it led to the creation of Load and Reload, and yeah, it's a fucking load, alright. Now, you know, Load saw Metallica attempt to adapt to their surroundings in the metal landscape as, you know, it drastically changed, you know. Groove metal like Pantera and alternative metal like Faith No More and Alice in Chains were on top of the game, and nu metal was unfortunately making its emergence with Korn. So Metallica essentially tries to fuse those sounds in a more hard rock setting, and it's average at best. You know, I think it has some good deep cuts, but that are actually genuinely great, but you know, those moments are few and far in between, as a lot of the things that the band attempt on here come off quite sterile, uninspired. A lot of the groove metal and alt metal sounds of this thing are pretty standard at best. They don't really add much of an interesting twist or add anything exciting to them. They also try like a bunch of other things, like some like southern rock influences for some of their tracks, and you know, it's funny because those are some of the better tracks on the album, in my opinion. Some tracks on here just border on fucking butt rock, if I'm being honest here. Like and I don't see enough people even recognizing that. So I think most of Load and Reload should be recognized as fucking butt rock, if I'm being honest here.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, and and some of the weirdest moments in Metallica's discography come up on here too, like the fucking slap bass line on The Cure. Like, that was just weird. Like, you're not fucking Les Claypool, get out of here. Actually, fun fact, Les Claypool tried out for Metallica, I think, when Justice for All was coming out. Yeah, he was too good, and they just told him to piss off. Then we got Primus. You know, I think production-wise, you know, it's fine. It's pleasant. It's heavy. The soundscape is thick, and, you know, everyone does a good job with what they're given. But then again, there are just some very poor ideas that are stretched out unnecessarily. Like, some of these tracks don't need to be as long as they are. Metallica proved that they can do great long songs in the past, but on Load, a lot of them are just tiresome and stale. And this album, of course, is blatant filler. Like, it doesn't need to be an hour and 20 minutes, and it should be cut down by 5 tracks at least. And then we ended up getting Reload, so that was the yikes.
Alright. Load.
Go. Yeah,
I'm not too sure. Oh, okay. Load, the moment in Metallica's discography where they forgot how to cut down albums. Well, I guess what I'll give Load that I can't give the other 3 is, at least most of the time, it's, you know, pretty listenable. But the only problem is a lot of it's just filler. See, when Metallica started departing further from thrash metal, that was sort of when they started to really, you know, fall quality-wise. Like, now they're adding all these, like, southern rock influences and stuff, and it now just all of a sudden makes the music more generic, more drawn out, and a lot of the time just really boring. Like, there are some highlights here, like, you know, I'll get onto those, but there are some tracks that I can actually say I do enjoy, not really, like, top-tier Metallica, but ones that I can, you know, actually give a, you know, decent thumbs up to. then there are some tracks which just, border on Reload levels of quality. And we already know what I think of Reload.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have too much else to say outside of that. It's it's an album, alright. It's not a bad album, but it's not a bad one, but it's yeah, it is what it is,
Yeah, it's an album, alright. An album that has songs, of course, and those songs have chords, of course.
Can't forget the chords.
So yeah, my favorite tracks from Load are King Nothing, Until It Sleeps, which I think is one of Metallica's most underrated radio singles. And Mama Said. The worst tracks are Poor Twisted Me, Thorn Within, Ronnie, and Outlaw Torn.
Did I talk about Death Magnetic? I can't remember.
Oh wait, you didn't. Shit.
I did.
Right, crap.
my bad. Sorry, my bad.
I forgot I did go last. Okay.
I'm too tired to even stop you because I was just second guessing myself, and I was like, "Oh fuck, I must have forgotten." But I must have a 5-second memory.
That was my bad. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Death Magnetic. It's not awful. It certainly attempts to play to Metallica's strengths with a very thrash metal sound. But the problem is that the thrash metal on Death Magnetic is some of the most synthetic and sterile thrash metal I've ever heard in my life. It sounds so fucking forced. It sounds like they dragged themselves into the studio. They went, okay, we have to make a thrash metal sound. Thrash metal album. Everyone's clowning on us. We've proven we can do this before. Let's just fucking get this out of the way. This is exactly what this album sounds like to me. None of the songs are like, there's some good tracks, but a lot of the track listing is just completely uninspired garbage. And not to mention the production is fucking so, Sam, you mentioned it sounds so shit. There's no punchiness to it. It just all sounds like a fucking broken speaker or some shit. It's hard to sit through again. The track
they're desperately trying to blast you with their brilliance.
Yeah, blast me. Yeah, they certainly do. And again, way too bloated. Way too bloated.
Distorted does not equal good. Metallica, get this right. I already said my worst and best tracks, so you can go.
My favorite tracks on Death Magnetic were All Nightmare Long and My Apocalypse. My least favorite tracks were Cyanide and The Judas Kiss.
My favorites on Load were probably Hero of the Day, Until It Sleeps, and maybe The Outlaw Torn. That one was surprisingly okay for a nearly 10-minute track. And my least favorite's 2x4, Poor Twisted Me. Not sure what the other one is, probably like Ronnie or something. And yeah.
Alright, number 7, I chose Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
I also chose Hardwired.
Whoa, I also chose Hardwired.
Damn, we all have the same albums out of the way. Literally.
Sane anger moment.
Sane anger. Hardwired to Self-Destruct. As of right now, the most recent album in the band's catalogue. And, one that to me is one of the better things they've done around the aftermath of the Black Album. Now, Hardwired does suffer from, a few glaring issues. For one, much like many Metallica albums, it's bloated and the tracks are unnecessarily long. I think that they really need to change that, and I doubt they will, honestly. Some tracks on this album just feel way too monotonous and tedious to take in all at once, especially with the groove-based tracks that just don't appeal to me. It does come off like Metallica are once again running out of ideas, as they're reverting back to sounds and ideas from their 90s era, while also being a good return to their thrash roots. And overall, it doesn't really seem that essential in the band's evolution. But there are some qualities to take away from this album that left a good impression on me. The production is actually pretty good sounding when compared to pretty much everything they did after the Black Album. I think some of Metallica's best songs in a while are on this album. James vocally is really good. His lyrics are really well done and have a good message to them often. There is some great riffs and guitar work on this album, and it has some really good thrash tracks as well as some groove-heavy, accessible tracks. As a whole, it isn't that great. It's way too long, but it has great tracks. And on the first disc especially, the last disc is a bit much, but as far as new material from Metallica goes, this is gold, honestly.
This is a turning point in my rankings. I think every album beyond this point is good to some extent. And yeah, Hardwired is certainly good. I don't think it's great, and I definitely don't think it's a full return to form for the band. But instrumentally, it's very solid, it's exciting, and the best tracks on this album showcase some of the energy and feel that, Metallica's finest moments have. Hardwired, Atlas Rise, Spit Out the Bone are all like top tier Metallica tracks, and there seems to be a genuine passion and energy behind them, unlike pretty much everything on Death Magnetic. Unfortunately, there's still a large number of like very forced and uninteresting tracks plaguing mostly the album's back end. Definitely not the closing track though, but the last half of the album is generally quite uninspired and uninteresting. But the moments that are great are definitely worth sticking out for. But also, again, it's too bloated. But I don't think that's ever going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. It's certainly listenable, and that's something that I can give it that I can't give the other albums. And by that I mean it's listenable all the way through. Load, it's mostly listenable. And that's a good thing. Hardwired to Self-Destruct, it's the mark to the everything up from this point is listenable. The only problem is that's kind of all I can say, but I'll go on anyway. It's definitely a step up from everything since Load. Like, it definitely improves on a lot of things. It's, I guess, it's less generic, sort of, but even, hang on, sorry, I'm sort of mixing up my positives with my negatives here, because I'm saying that it's less generic, but it's also generic at the same time. But I'll get onto that.
Okay.
It definitely feels more full of life, I guess. It feels more like they actually care about what they're doing. Because, yeah, and there's not any awful tracks on here. That's also a good thing. But then again, the reason I'm kind of running out of things to say is that it is pretty forgettable. The first disc is, pretty okay. I'd say if you just had the first disc, then I'd say you've got a pretty, solid heavy metal EP on your own right there. Maybe add Spin Out the Bone to that list. But then the first 5 tracks in the second disc are just really boring. I do not care one bit about some of those. Do I have anything to say beyond that point? Yeah, I don't know. They still don't know how to cut down albums, so there's that. Yeah. Could be worse, could be better.
Could be worse, you could have had another Saint Anger.
And at least the drums sound good.
At least the drums actually sound good. Thank you, Lars. Alright. My favourite tracks from Hardwired to Self-Destruct are Atlas Rise, Hardwired, Moth into the Flame, Dream No More, and Spit Out the Bone. My least favourite tracks are Halo on Fire, Man Unkind, Here Comes Revenge, and Am I Savage?
Oh god, I scrolled up in my notes. Alright, my favourite tracks were Hardwired, Atlas Rise, Halo on Fire, and Spit Out the Bone. My least favourite tracks were Dream No More and Murder One.
From what I can remember, my favourites are probably Moth into Flame, maybe Spit Out the Bone, Hardwired. I remember Atlas Rise being pretty good too. And my least favourites are probably everything from Man Unkind to Murder One.
Fair. Alright, moving on to our number 6 picks, and this is the point in my ranking where I think every album past this is pretty good. And my number 6 is Lulu.
My number 6 is Metallica.
And my number 6 is Lulu too.
Again, I'll go last
nice. Then. Alright, I'll make sure to remember it this time.
I'll try it as well.
Alright, Lulu. Metallica's 2011 collaboration with the legendary Lou Reed of the Velvet Underground fame. And it's an album that is notoriously hated by so many people, but more specifically Metallica fans. It's a controversial album for sure, if I'm being honest. I actually kind of like it. Dare I say I think Lulu is good. Now, the problems that this album has are very noticeable, and very glaring, to say the least. A lot of the moments that are very awkward, especially on Lou Reed's end. Did I just call Lou Reed Lulu, for fuck's sake? No, okay, let me rephrase it. Lulu Reed. A lot of the moments are very awkward on this album, especially on Lou Reed's end. Sometimes the production is very sterile and somewhat generic. A lot of the lyrics are very uncomfortable to listen to with how just out there they are, and there's plenty of dumb moments, like the opening lines to the album and James Hetfield saying "small town girl" and "I am the table" will just never not be funny to me. But there's things I actually like about it. I think the dark tone and heavy nature of the production works well with the very depressive, dark, and avant-garde poetry that Lou Reed is, saying over these heavy instrumentals. For recent Metallica standards, the production is really good. It sounds pretty great, honestly. It's performed well, and it saw some experimentation on the instrumental end, which is rare for Metallica. The lyrics, while at times unintentionally funny or just straight up uncomfortable, are written well. There's moments that are genuinely gut-wrenching and saddening, and I think the weird juxtaposition between Lou Reed's weary and aged vocals work for the subject matter. Not to mention, this is a rare kind of collaboration. You'd think that these artists' paths would never cross, or you'd never think this would ever happen, and it's kind of ridiculous to think that it did. But it happened, and it was a ballsy move for Metallica. When are you ever gonna catch fucking Slayer collabing with Bob Dylan, or Megadeth collabing with Leonard Cohen, or fucking Iron Maiden collabing with Tom Waits? Never. But Metallica collaborated with Lou Reed, and that is respectable on a whole other level. And honestly, it gets way more shit than it deserves, in my opinion.
I probably like the album for completely different reasons. Alright, Lulu doesn't work at all. On the surface, it absolutely doesn't work. It looks like it shouldn't work. When it was announced, it sounded like it shouldn't work, and as expected, it didn't work. But that's honestly just what makes it so charming to me. A lot of what people hate about the album, which is the fact that it exists, is kind of, I guess, what gives it the fact that it's actually, I guess, enjoyable.
Whoops.
The opening lyrics on their own, they just immediately brought me in. Lou Reed's lyrics here are just really all over the place. Let me just quote the opening lyrics here. I would cut my legs and tits off when I think of Boris Karloff and Kinski in the dark of the moon. What does it mean? I have no idea, but I'm happy it exists. Why is James Hetfield a table? We may never know. Why is he the aggressor? Who knows? It's just the concept of the album on its own is what makes it, I guess, interesting to me. And it's surprisingly not it never gets to the point where I just want to take my headphones off and smash them. It never reaches that point. It just remains, pretty okay throughout. But then again, it's still not really a lot of Metallica's best material, The instrumentation, while it does, throw a bit of, experimental stuff in there, especially that long ambient intro at the end of Junior Dad, it's just, I don't know, it's still not all that inspired, and it's 80 minutes long, or nearly 90. Still, they still don't know how to cut down their albums. So even if I do think it's even if I am praising it compared to a lot of the albums below, it's still just an okay album to me. But definitely not awful or anything.
I think it's kind of weird that this is the last album that Lou Reed ever made when he was alive, and then I think I remember seeing something. I think David Bowie said this was the best thing Lou Reed had ever done.
Yeah.
I think it's very odd, but I think that's funny in some ways.
Yeah. And the thing is, the way the whole album turned out was pretty much exactly how they wanted it to turn out. It was not they accidentally made a disaster or anything. This is, exactly what they wanted. I'm pretty sure they loved working together from what I've heard. So.
That's what I heard too. I remember seeing interviews about it, and I think I think they mentioned that. I think one of Lou Reed's performances actually made the members of Metallica cry. I think.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Small town girl.
The table.
Let me just pull like a random quote off a song and see if just sort of riff off that.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh. I cry icicles in my stein. The heartbeats flutter with an abnormal rhythm. The pain shoots through my body, a sword between my thighs. And Lars is just like sobbing in the background.
So fucking good.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Alright.
Where are we?
we're at you talking about Metallica now.
Metallica. I think Metallica Subtitled is very hit or miss. It's got some absolute metal classics, of course, and you know those moments are definitely make the album for me. But there are a lot of songs on this that are just too accessible, too squeaky clean, and the sound of the album just doesn't really do the band any justice. It sounds too polished instrumentally, and what's distracting to me is a lot of the tracks is that James Hetfield's vocals are still very raw, still very aggressive, and it just doesn't really blend well with the very pristine instrumentation and very cleaned up just mixing on this album. And even aside from that, a lot of the tracks on here are just quite boring. You know, for lack of a better word, they're just boring. The punchiness of their previous albums isn't there on some of the tracks. And, you know, the aggression and the magic of their earlier works just seems to be kind of lost here. But then, that being said, there are tracks like Enter Sandman and The Unforgiven, and obviously those are classics, and those are incredible tracks, and, you know, they're definitely worth sticking around for.
I'm holding my copy of the Black Album on CD in fear. And yes, I actually have a copy of the Black Album on CD. I'm only adding because they sold out. Alright, my favorite tracks from Lulu are Junior Dead, Mistress Dead, Cheat on Me, and Dragon. My least favorite tracks are The View and Brandenburg Gate.
I'll go. My favorite tracks on Metallica were Enter Sandman, Sad But True, Nothing Else Matters, and The Unforgiven. My least favorite tracks was The Struggle Within.
Alright, I think this might be the only point in the podcast where I actually can't choose any of the best or worst tracks. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just completely stuck trying to choose like what I liked and what I didn't like here. See, I'll leave it at that.
I guess you can label every track on here as good and bad.
Yeah. I'll just quietly skip this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, we made it to the top 5, the cream of the crop of Metallica's discography, and this is the point where I think all of these albums are great. So, for my number 5 pick, I chose Metallica, aka the Black Album.
I chose Lulu.
I chose the Black Album as well.
Nice.
We'll have the same top 4.
You go last.
Yeah, I'll go last.
Alright, so, as I'm holding my Black Album, I'm going to talk about the Black Album. Right. Metallica's widest selling album. No. Please don't. Please don't remind me that album exists. I'm talking about the good Black Album.
BDSM Weezer.
That one's not too bad. The singles were really good. Okay.
It has good songs in it, but then it just turns into like...
Even Living in LA is good.
I like that track, to be honest.
I do like Zombie Bastards, I'll say that.
Yeah, no,
I have like 30 scrubbles on that one.
Nice. Alright, so now let's talk about a good Black Album. Metallica's Black Album. So yeah, the Black Album. Metallica's widest selling album and one of the widest selling metal albums of all time. But with that in mind, it's also the band's most divisive album in a way too, if we don't count Saint Anger or Death Magnetic or Load or Reload or Lulu. That division came because, Metallica made a drastic change in their sound and style, and it isn't a thrash metal album. They abandoned their thrash roots in favor of like a groove-heavy, slower album that's mostly heavy metal inspired and pretty accessible, and You know, a lot of fans saw this as betrayal and selling out, as it gets a bad rap from the metal community and thrash purists, and the outrage is just fucking stupid in my opinion. Like, you're gonna complain that your favorite band is successful? Okay then. And you know, in many ways, I genuinely think the Black Album is kind of overlooked in a sense, and I think it gets more shit than it deserves. You know, the production on this album is pretty clean and very good for the most part. The sludgy and slow-burning sound of this album lets Metallica explore some riffs and song dynamics. Not to mention, the guitars are produced fantastically. There's lots of power behind the production. The dark tone of the album is great. And it complements what James is doing on the songwriting and vocal front very well. Speaking of that, I think James sounds amazing on this album. His vocals are very good at conveying the anger and sadness that turn up on the lyrical front, a lot of which is very dark, very personal and emotional. Some of Metallica's best writing is like on tracks like The God That Failed, My Friend Misery, Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, Wherever I May Roam, etc. You know, this moment allowed James Hetfield to really flesh himself out as a songwriter and a vocalist, and I respect the Black Album for that. You know, I think the track list is, you know, very consistent. It has some classics in there, as well as some really good deep cuts. You know, it does have a habit of being samey towards the end, but it has plenty of fantastic songs to its name. And I think, and overall, I just think it's a pretty great, you know, accessible record. I think it's a great moment for Metallica.
Oh, should I go or?
Yeah. You've the same album. So.
Oh, okay. Alright. Metallica, the Black Album. It's the sellout album, as everyone likes to call it. Oh man, I can't believe this. They totally sold out this one. Yeah, this one's just, this one's like, you know, pop metal through and through. Yeah, this one's all the way at the bottom for me. But yeah, everything past this point I'd recommend. So let's talk about the Black Album, eh? So while it does kind of get rid of the thrash metal sound, it's still actually pretty solid on its own. Like, there are a lot of really solid tracks here. A lot of, you know, great instrumentation. Well, I mean, I don't know how you categorize great instrumentation, but, you know, pretty solid instrumentation. Hetfield's vocals are really good on this album. Some of their catchiest materials here too. Like, you've got tracks like Sad But True. That one's just a bop through and through. The only problem is that even if there are a lot of highlights here, a lot of, you know, pretty good material here, there are some tracks I guess you can call filler. Like, there are some tracks that I guess don't really stick out to me all that much. And yeah, maybe it's not like as hard-hitting or, you know, insane or complicated as some of their best thrash metal material. But even then, it still retains the band's spark, and it still makes for some really solid metal. Yeah, it's all I got.
Yeah, I went with probably my most quote-unquote controversial opinion. I put Lulu in Metallica's top 5. Don't get me wrong, it's in no way, shape or form a masterpiece, and at times Lou Reed's vocals are really awkwardly incorporated into the avant-garde metal instrumentals, but the fact that this album has been labelled quote-unquote one of the worst albums ever made is just ridiculous, and it only really proves how narrow-minded a lot of Metallica's fans are when it comes to, you know, experimental music and doing something out of the ordinary. If this is quote-unquote too experimental, it really isn't. It only really scratches the surface of what avant-garde metal can do. I think the fact that some of it is a bit awkward and poorly incorporated maybe gives off the impression that it's a bit more experimental than it really is. But all this thing really is just Lou Reed being Lou Reed, over some metal, like, backing instrumentals provided by Metallica, which honestly is really respectable. After their last few albums at this point, you know, you wouldn't really expect them to go in such a, you know, different and unique direction, and I'm glad they decided to try it out, because, you know, as much hate as they got for this is one of the most interesting things they've done, for sure. I think the only reason this album gets as much negative attention as it does is because a large portion of Metallica's audience isn't really used to this kind of music. They're kind of just for lack of a better word, the Monster Energy broke kind. And this is just Lou Reed, singing about whatever Lou Reed sings about is just completely out of their fucking realm of knowledge. But the album is actually, I just know, I had, like, a lot of the instrumentals were really hard hitting. Especially the final track. That one was fantastic. And I really don't think this album deserves anywhere near as much hate as it does. I'm not going to pretend that everything here was well executed, because it certainly wasn't, but it's definitely a good album.
Yeah. Alright, my favorite tracks from the Black Album are Enter Sandman, Sad But True, Holier Than Thou, Wherever I May Roam, Nothing Else Matters, My Friend of Misery, The God That Failed, and Of Wolf and Man. My least favorite track is The Unforgiven.
My favorite track...
Spicy take.
Yep. I think it's a good song, but like I just prefer everything else on the album to it.
My favorite tracks on Lulu were Pumping Blood, Mistress Dread, Ice Honey, and Junior Dad. My least favorite track was Brandenburg Gate.
Small town girl.
Classic.
Classic. Thank you, James.
My favorites, from what I can remember, are Sad But True, The Unforgiven, Enter Sandman, Through the Never. Pretty sure The God That Failed was really good too. I'm just looking at my Spotify likes here. That's a lot I've liked. And my least favorite is probably Don't Tread On Me. Yeah.
All right. We're in the top 4, and we all have the same albums in the top 4.
Yeah,
and they're all the 80s albums as well. God, oh, that's too good. So yeah, my number 4 pick, I chose And Justice for All.
I chose Kill 'Em All.
I chose And Justice for None by Five Finger Death Punch.
Oh God.
Again, I'll go last.
All right, And Justice for All is the last 80s album in Metallica's discography, their last pure thrash metal album before they went on their accessible route, and one I think is the weakest in that run of thrash classics, but it is a classic nonetheless. This was an important moment in Metallica's lifespan as a band too, as a drastic change occurred between the release of Master of Puppets and Justice for All. Unfortunately, the band's bassist, Cliff Burton, passed away in a bus accident while the band were touring for Master of Puppets, and the band decided that they wanted to continue on, and in his place they hired Jason Newsted. I only bring this context up because to me Cliff Burton's death heavily influenced what happened with And Justice for All and where the band went sonically with it. I personally feel like some of the songs that the band made on this album probably wouldn't have even been conceived without that happening, and it's weird, that would have been, it's weird, like, thinking about what would have been if, he had lived and where Metallica would have went. With all that in mind, I think And Justice for All is a great album. I think that, in terms of performances, everyone here does a great job, except Jason Newsted, obviously, because there's no fucking bass on this album. And I think that everyone, I think the guitar work, especially on this album, is fantastic. It has sharpness, it has bite, it has chunk, it has power, the riffs are great, solos are fantastic, and the drumming is decent. The songs are just as progressive, intelligent, and as lengthy as they were on Master of Puppets. Some tracks sound like they have more of an emotional weight to them, and the tracks that are just pure aggressive thrash are exhilarating. James Hetfield is at his most savage on this album too, as his delivery is great. He's the angriest he's ever sounded on a record, and it works with a lot of the political messaging in the lyrics. And the lyrics, I'd say, are some of Metallica's best in as well as that. Maybe it's not some of my like personal favorites in their catalog, but it definitely has a sharpness to it and an anger to it that I always appreciate. I think it has a consistently great track list that has just so many great Metallica songs. It has some of the most savage cuts, some great deep cuts, and it has one of my favorite Metallica songs ever, and it was also the first Metallica song I ever heard, which was One, and that song still remains one of my favorite songs of all time. I guess the only gripe that I have with this album is some of the production choices are very questionable. Lars's drums sound like really clean, dry. They're kind of high in the mix a lot of the time. They're not awful like Saint Anger, but it's just really distracting. The Viking chants on the frayed ends of Sanity are just still really ridiculous to me. The editing on the Lives to Die instrumental is really bad. And obviously I brought this up already, but it's like beating a dead horse, but Jason Newsted's bass is nowhere to be found in this album, and it just makes the whole soundscape kind of hollow. The context I mentioned definitely played into that being the case with that bit of instrumentation, but I would have loved a bit of bass in there, that would have been nice. Besides those grievances, I think And Justice for All is great. I love it. I have it on vinyl even, and it's an important record for Metallica, and it has some fantastic tracks to its name. Sorry, that was a really long one. Jesus.
I really should have skimmed through these albums before doing this, so I had a better idea of what I'm talking about. Alright, this album, while it's still among the 4 classic thrash metal albums, is kind of controversial in a way, because there's basically no bass on here. I'm not sure if there's any bass at all. Because, when I first started listening to the album, it was very noticeable, something just fell off. But once I, started listening to it further, it honestly started to become less of a problem for me. And in the end, it's still, a really solid album from Metallica, even without the, the bass. It's probably their most, I guess, prog metal album to date, if that makes any sense. The tracks follow a very progressive structure, and at the same time, it comes out of some of their best yet, And Justice for All in 1. But it's also not one of their most engaging, but that's not a huge issue to me, as there's a lot of solid material on this thing. And the songwriting, too, is pretty great. With the political touches and stuff. It's, another very solid album from Metallica. I don't know if it's, I don't know if I love it, but it's still really, really good.
I went with their debut, Kill 'Em All, which is a very fast, very loud, and very punchy album, but it just doesn't really live up to the sonic quality and the anthemic nature of the band's projects that would come after this one. Obviously, tracks like Hit the Lights and Seek and Destroy stand a test of time, and they remain highlights in the band's very spotty discography. But there are moments on here like the track Anesthesia, for example, that just feels devoid of any real purpose or direction. It just kind of sounds like a lot of thrash metal pastiche at times. And the magic that made some of their later projects so incredible to me is just kind of scarce here. It definitely exists, as I said. Tracks like Seek and Destroy are incredible, but there are a few moments on this thing where I'm just kind of not that impressed. I just kind of can't help but think how much I'd rather be listening to Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning. But for a debut, it certainly established the band's identity very well, and it definitely set the groundworks for albums like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, and it's still a very respectable album, and definitely a highlight in the band's discography, especially considering half their albums are awful.
The Anesthesia pulling teeth disrespect, Jesus.
Damn.
You're really doing Cliff Burton dirty like that. Damn. Alright, look, whatever. My favorite tracks from And Justice for All are 1. Blackened, And Justice for All, The Short Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, The Frayed Ends of Sanity, and Dyer's Eve. My least favorite tracks are To Live Is To Die and Eye of the Beholder.
My favorite tracks on Kill 'Em All were Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Seek and Destroy. My least favorite track was Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth.
My favorites were probably And Justice for All, 1, Blackened, and Harvester of Sorrow. And I don't know, my least favorite is probably either Eye of the Beholder or The Shorter Straw, one of those two.
Alright, we're in the top 3 now. And
let's go.
Yeah, my number 3 pick is Kill 'Em All.
My
Kill
number
'em
3.
all.
Before I reveal this, it's really not that controversial. I absolutely love this album. It's just there's two I prefer, and my number 3 pick is Master of Puppets.
Ooh, mildly spicy.
At least
Mildly.
at least it's
Yeah,
top
it's one of the
3.
best-
At least it's fucking
it's-
top 3.
It's one of the best metal albums of all time. I just have personal favorites.
Okay,
That's cool.
at least it's top 3. At least it's top 3. So happy here. Yeah, it's definitely top 3.
Nick, calm down.
Okay.
Alright.
Oh, what did you pick, Sam?
Oh, I said in the background while you guys were talking. Whoops.
Oh.
Kill 'em all.
Alright, so nostalgia once again goes last. Alright, so
Poor nostalgia.
Metallica's... Yeah. It's what you get. Alright,
Yeah.
so Kill 'Em All, Metallica's debut is extremely important, not only because it's an amazing debut, but also because it's a defining album for an entire subgenre that this album helped pioneer. And, influence, of course, isn't always everything, and because something isn't and just because something is influential doesn't automatically make it good. But just Kill 'Em All is quality. It is a fucking brilliant album. In terms of how it sounds, I think Kill 'Em All is very refined for a band's debut album. The bass is very present in the mix, the drums sound great, the guitars sound fantastic and sharp with its tone. The guitar work is just on a whole other level of great on this thing. The riffs are fantastic, thrashy, memorable, and well crafted. Although, some of these riffs were basically stolen from Dave Mustaine when he was kicked out of the band. The solos are insanely good on many of these tracks. Lars' drumming is pretty good. Cliff Burton's bass work is amazing, and if you want a track that truly shows how phenomenal of a bass player he was, then Anesthesia Pulling Teeth is a perfect example of that. I think vocally a very young James Hetfield is very raw. His vocals work with the intense thrash metal speeds and riffs. The vocal effects are a little off-putting when I first heard it, but I can look past them now with repeated listens, and then again, James Hetfield is still trying to find his vocal niche, I would say. He is pretty amateurish in that sense, but, he does eventually find that, literally on the next album. The track list itself is consistently great with some classic thrash metal songs and just and it isn't short of any highs, like some of which are just some of the band's best songs ever, and I wouldn't say there's a bad song on here either. It's just thrash metal galore. The only thing that puts it lower on my list is that, Metallica's sound, it wasn't fully formed yet, as they just wore their influences on their sleeves heavy. Like, a lot of it bleeds hardcore punk, a lot of it bleeds heavy metal, like Motorhead specifically. But, that was common with very early thrash albums. Besides that, this is a consistently great debut album that has some incredible thrash metal tracks that have both intensity and power, and it still holds up to this day, I would say.
Kill 'Em All. It's honestly a pretty solid start for Metallica. I really enjoyed this thing. It's definitely the catchiest yet too. They'd obviously go on to release much more, ambitious works, much more cinematic experiences, but this is just a really fun thrash metal album. It's just a blast from start to finish. You've got some absolute jams in the beginning, some absolute jams, spread out from that point on. The guitars, the riffs, they're really solid. Hetfield's vocals maybe aren't as great as they will be in the future, like on the Black Album and stuff, but they're definitely, pretty good at doing the job that they do. And yeah, it's a bit one note. There are some tracks that kind of fall into the background, but overall it's a pretty solid album, and definitely, a good sign of, what was to come.
Yeah, I went with Master of Puppets, which is a legendary album. It's incredible. Don't let the number 3 ranking fool you. I just
Still number 3 after all.
I just feel more of a connection to the two albums I've ranked above it. It's nothing personal. I'm sorry, Master of Puppets. I still love you. This album took Metallica's sound to completely new horizons, and is in many ways the thrash metal album for a lot of people. And while not for me, I can see why, for good reason. It's incredibly intense. It's technically impressive. Politically charged lyrics are fantastic. It's got some of the most iconic and anthemic choruses and verses in metal history. And, this project just excels in a lot of the different fields that make a great metal album. There really is nothing negative I can say about this project. And again, the only reason it's so low is because I prefer 2 albums. But that being said, I mean, it's a milestone in metal history, and it's an incredible album through and through.
All right. My favorite tracks from Kill 'Em All are Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, Whiplash, Phantom Lord, Seek and Destroy, and Metal Militia. My least favorite track is No Remorse.
My favorite tracks on Master of Puppets were Battery, Master of Puppets, Disposable Heroes, Orion, and Damage Incorporated. My least favorite track was The Thing That Should Not Be.
God, no, that's one of my favorites, for fuck's sake. Oh, this is just upset Mick Day, isn't it?
My favorites were The Four Horsemen, Hit the Lights, Seek and Destroy, Jump in the Fire, Anesthesia Pulling Teeth. My least favorite was Whiplash.
Alright, we're in the top 2 now.
Top 2. Let's go.
My number 2 pick is Ride the Lightning.
My number 2 pick is And Justice for All.
My number 2 is Master of Puppets.
Right.
Got a bit of variety here.
Yeah, we do, surprisingly. So, yeah, Ride the Lightning, Metallica's sophomore album. It is fucking amazing. This album sees the band improve on so many fronts when compared to its debut. The influences that the band previously leaned onto are no longer present on here. It seems like Metallica have finally found the sound that best suits them. It remains a pure thrash record, but it also sees the band incorporate some different elements and improve upon some others that we saw on their debut. Like, for example, the instrumental track Call of Cthulhu is just really expansive for Metallica and well crafted for an instrumental piece, and the band started to incorporate more acoustic and grand moments like, the intro to Fight Fire with Fire and, the first amazing ballad type track Metallica ever made, Fade to Black. Their sound is just fleshed out into something that seems very badass, to say the least. Sound-wise, this album improves too, as the production is incredible on this album. The space in this thing is very wide. The drums are very punchy and energetic. The bass sounds great. The guitar tone is amazing. It has this gritty chunk to it, and it's great. It's one of my favorite guitar tones ever, honestly. James improved in terms of vocals and songwriting too. He's slowly maturing into more of an expansive songwriter, and his vocals maintain the ferociousness that we saw in the first album. The riffs on this album are incredibly powerful and very memorable. The bass lines are great. For Whom the Bell Tolls has to be one of my favorite bass intros ever. That is fucking fantastic. And the solos are really solid. The track list does have one track in particular that does kind of drag it down for me, and it's well known Metallica don't care for this track themselves, but I'll get to it when we get to least favorite tracks. And but there's plenty of amazing tracks that bring so much to the Metallica canon, and just 2 of my favorite Metallica songs are on this album too. So there's that. Ride the Lightning on its own is incredible, but there's just one album that I think is supreme.
Okay.
You want to go or should I go?
Yeah, since we all have different albums, I'll go now.
Alright.
I went with And Justice for All. I almost said And Master of Puppets.
And Master of Lightning.
And Puppets for All.
And Puppets for All.
And Puppets. And Justice for All is an absolute gem, and for the longest time I did actually regard it as my favorite Metallica album. As a whole, this just feels to me like Metallica's most raw and ruthless album. The compositions here are fantastic. Songwriting is legendary. Tracks like One are, among the most impressive thing any metal band has ever done. The instrumentation is raw. It's powerful. I will admit the mixing isn't the best, but, it rarely takes away from my enjoyment when the core source material is as good as it is. And, I even think that a lot of the more hollowed out production adds a very dark, very apocalyptic quality to the music. It's not something that takes away the enjoyment from me at all. It's genuinely impossible for me to find a bad track in this album. Its highs are completely mind-blowing. Its lows are still okay. It's just an album that I've always loved, and I've always gravitated to more so than Master of Puppets. And yeah, I just, in recent times, there's an album that has grown on me massively, and I had to put And Justice for All in second, as much as that pains me to do.
Alright. Master of Puppets, the album that changed it all. The moment Metallica became Metallica. The moment Walter White became Heisenberg. It's the album that changed everything. I'm pretty sure there's like 4 kids in my school that have the exact same Master of Puppets shirt. Everyone knows this album. And it's really good. Yeah, I can say that this is a really great album, definitely. It's cinematic, it's an experience of an album. It's definitely, I guess, the most mature album to date in terms of the sound, in terms of how they've improved over the years. Even if there's just one album before that I might like a little bit better. There's a whole bunch of topics they jump through, like using drugs, I guess living in an insane asylum, a whole song about the Cthulhu monster. It jumps from topic to topic, but overall it still stays in a very consistent lane. And consistent is a word that I definitely use to describe this album. It is just, after the first track, it is just nothing but quality from front to back. Like the stretch from track 2 to track 8, there isn't a single skip there. It is very solid. The riffs are amazing. Hetfield's vocals are amazing. The lyricism is very good. It's very anthemic. I'm pretty sure there was I think I saw a video where there were these students in Istanbul that were protesting to Metallica music. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, this album as a whole is just really solid. Definitely, recommend it. Pretty underrated gem in the metal universe.
Oh yeah, I don't think you've ever heard of this album. It's one of the most underrated albums ever. It's
Very
called Master
niche,
of Puppets by this band you probably never
Yeah.
heard of. They're called Metallica. Alright, with that being said, my favorite tracks on Ride the Lightning are two of my favorite Metallica songs ever. For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, then Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, Call of Cthulhu, Creeping Death, and Trapped Under Ice. My least favorite track is Escape.
My favorite tracks on And Justice for All were Blackened, And Justice for All, The Shortest Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, The Frayed Ends of Sanity, Dyer's Eve, and of course, one. My least favorite track is To Live Is To Die.
Alright, my favorite tracks are Master of Puppets, The Thing That Should Not Be, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Disposable Heroes, Orion. My least favorite is Battery.
Oh, that's a hot one. Oh, damn.
Yeah, just, doesn't do too much for me. Everything from that point does a lot for me.
There, I guess.
So yeah.
Right. Number 1. Mine is Master of Puppets.
Mine is Ride the Lightning.
And mine is also Ride the Lightning.
Right.
We'll do the normal order then.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. That works.
Yes. Master of Puppets. In my opinion, it's the best Metallica album, and I'd also say it's one of, if not the best metal album of all time. The way that I see it, everything that Metallica were doing up to this point was building up to what I think is their magnum opus, and it only saw Metallica create their most intelligent, consistent, and meticulous album. The production on this album is amazing. In comparison with Ride the Lightning, it sounds a little bit cleaner, but it doesn't lose the chunk and bite that Ride the Lightning had. The soundscapes, however, feel larger, a lot more epic in scale, and that works for the fast pace and energetic thrash riffs, as well as the virtuosic guitar solos and ballads, like moments where they just sound amazing all in all. The riffs on this album are brilliant. Kirk Hammett's guitar solos are fantastic. Cliff Burton's bass work is fantastic. Some of Lars Ulrich's best drumming is on this album, and say what you will about Mr. Napster, but he did a brilliant job on Master of Puppets. And James Hetfield just sounds incredible. The power and aggression he displays on top of these intense instrumentals is great, and it only adds to the experience. The song structures on Master of Puppets are a lot more lengthy, a little progressive in a sense, and Metallica adapted this sound greatly. And I think this album has some of Metallica's best lyrics too. They touch on a wide array of topics, like substance abuse, the military's lack of empathy on the battlefield, just mental health issues, just being mistreated in a sanitarium, and they're just written in such a way that makes them very gut-wrenching and just really gritty. The track list itself is just amazing track after amazing track. They each have their own sound, moods, tones, and I absolutely love the shit out of what Metallica presented on this album. And ever since I heard this album, I just had a huge, I don't know, it's just one I've gravitated towards ever since I first heard it. And it's an album that whenever I just feel like throwing on like a great metal album, I will always like think Master of Puppets. And, as a result, it's probably one of my favorite albums ever. And it's my favorite Metallica album, of course.
I went with Ride the Lightning. And, I remember about a year ago, I went on Rate Your Music. I wanted to see what the highest rated Metallica album, fully expecting it to be Master of Puppets, and I was surprised to see that it was Ride the Lightning, and I was like, really? That was like my fourth favorite at the time. I revisited it a few times, and every single time it just grew on me a little bit more. And, at this point, everything on this album has clicked so hard that it's not even funny. It's such an unbelievably incredible album. If we made this video last year, it would have probably been in like fourth. But I finally can appreciate the magic of this project. It took some getting used to, but honestly, this is up there with Power Slave as the best metal album of all time, in my opinion. Everything it does, it just executes almost perfectly. At its core, it's not too dissimilar to their debut, Kill 'Em All, but everything that project lacked in terms of innovation, progressive qualities, Ride the Lightning delivers in buckets full. It's 8 brilliant tracks that paint a very vividly apocalyptic, dense, and intense picture, and it's filled to the brim with some of the most incredible metal tracks I've ever heard in my life. Seriously, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Fade to Black, one after another on the same album, is fucking ridiculously incredible.
It literally is.
It should be illegal. That is
Yeah.
fucked. That is so good. And yeah, as I said, it's up there with Power Slave as my favorite metal album of all time. It's certainly my favorite thrash metal of all time, and it's grown to be my favorite Metallica album of all time. It's just fucking immense.
Alright, Ride the Lightning. Is it the album that changed it all? Is it the album that made Metallica? Who knows? But it sure is a step up from their debut, even if I love that one. Like, it's just unreal how much of a jump up in quality it was from Kill 'Em All, in terms of pretty much everything. It's cinematic, it's way more ambitious, the songwriting is just, completely ramped up to 1 billion. There's pretty much nothing but great material from front to back here. And, okay, the riffs are incredible, the vocals, while still sort of raw, they're very emotional, they're very, powerful. Everything here just works. It actually feels like you're in the cover, sitting in that seat, while there's a whole load of lightning just, being thrown at you from every single angle possible. Not like directly at you, but around you, I guess. That is a pretty bad description, but feels like you're in the album cover, basically. But yeah, everything here is just excellent. Is it my favorite metal album of all time? I have no idea, considering the sort of lack of metal experience I've had compared to a lot of other people in this server, I'm guessing. But it's definitely an amazing metal album, one that deserves to rank among some of the best of all time. It is okay.
Oh yeah, it's just okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not really.
It does have their best.
It has its moments.
It has like maybe has like some of their best tracks of all time, but like that's doesn't every album have that?
Yeah, especially Saint Anger.
Oh
Yeah.
god. Oh god. Okay, so yeah, with that being said, my favorite tracks on Master of Puppets are Battery, one of the most overlooked Metallica songs ever, The Thing That Should Not Be, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Disposable Heroes, Orion, and Damage Inc. I have no least favorite tracks.
Oh boy. My favorite tracks on Ride the Lightning are Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Fade to Black, obviously, and also Creeping Death, Call of Cthulhu, and honestly, I don't have any least favorites, even though weaker tracks are still incredible.
My favorites are probably Fade to Black, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Ride the Lightning, the Creeping Death, The Call of Cthulhu, Fight Fire with Fire probably, and I don't know, my least favorite is probably either Trapped Under Ice or Escape, one of those two. But then again, there aren't any tracks here that I would consider like only just pretty good, so that's really saying a lot.
Alright, true. And we did it. We ranked every Metallica album. Feels good.
Hell yeah.
We finally got to do it after all this. And yeah,
I'm pretty sure a lot of what I said there was just a complete mess, but hey, I got what I had to
it's better
get
than no
across.
podcast, to be fair. It's better than no podcast.
That's true.
Yeah, and Sam, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to actually come do this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really enjoyed this.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you back on in the future. We'd love to have you back.
Join me next time when we rank every Maroon 5 album.
Oh no. No.
Some worst to best I just refuse to do.
No, I'll do you one
V
better.
is
We'll
a
rank
masterpiece.
I'll do you one better. We'll rank every single Limp Bizkit album.
We'll rank every Creed album.
No! That's my breaking point. No Creed.
Okay.
I'll just get on with the
Value
outro
Pink.
now.
No, not Pink
Trying to
Floyd.
think of
Tesco
a-
Value Pearl Jam.
Trying to think of a bad artist.
Tesco Value Soundgarden, aka Audio Slave.
Every dot. You know what? Every Kiss album.
No, oh god, no.
We're still me and Mick have planned. Don't deny it. To do our worst to best on Mersbo. So
Wait, what?
My uncle really loves Kiss, so that would actually work out.
it'll be a 50-part episode.
No. I'll do you one better.
Worst to best on
fucking-
Viper.
No, worst to best on AC/DC. How about it?
No. I'm just not gonna listen to every AC/DC album. That's just not gonna happen.
Guys, worst to best of Jeff Buckley.
Don't do it over AC/DC. I would literally just show up listening, like having only listened to like 3.
He's got a pretty lengthy discography.
You could just say the same thing about every AC/DC album, to be fair.
We'd be talk about grasping at straws. We'd be trying so hard to say something about every single one of them.
True. Yeah, I think I'll just do the outro now. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode of the Taped Podcast. Who do you agree with more, actually? Let us know. Who do you think has the best ranking out of all of us? As usual, all of our links will be in the description to our own individual channels, our Album of the Year pages, everything for Sam as well. You should check out his channel. He posts some pretty good stuff, and check out his Album of the Year too. And with that being said, my name's been MickyT.
I'm Nostalgia.
I'm Sam the Music Critic.
And see ya!
Peace.